I was just trying to enjoy a quiet afternoon of fishing. The lake was still, the sun warm on my shoulders, and the only sound was the occasional ripple of water. It was one of those perfect days where nothing should go wrong. I had my favorite old rod, a folding chair, and a cooler with iced tea. Just me, the dock, and silence. Then I heard it, a distant whir growing louder, like a tiny storm on wheels. I looked up from my line to see a golf cart barreling down the gravel path toward the lake, dust flying in its wake. In it were three people in matching Crescent Lake Shores HOA polos, wearing sunglasses, lanyards, and the kind of stern expressions you'd expect from airport security, not lake enthusiasts. They stopped 10 feet from my dock and jumped out like they were ready to make an arrest. "You can't fish here," the woman in front snapped, marching over with a clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge. Her voice was loud, her tone rehearsed. She clearly thought she was on some kind of neighborhood patrol mission. I blinked. "Come again." "This is Crescent Lake Shores, private property," she said, as if reading it from a script. "No fishing unless you're a verified homeowner. You need to provide your unit number immediately." I slowly stood up, trying to understand what was happening. "Ma'am, I'm not in your HOA. I live here on this land. My family has owned this property for generations. You're standing on my dock." She raised an eyebrow, like I just told her the earth was flat. "That's not what our records say," she replied smugly, glancing at the two men behind her who nodded like backup dancers. She didn't ask for ID, didn't ask for my name, just jumped straight to, "We're calling the authorities." And she did. Right there. Called 911 to report me for fishing on my own dock. I didn't panic. I didn't argue. I just sat back down slowly, crossed my legs, and kept fishing. You could tell that made her even angrier. She wanted to fight, wanted me to yell or storm off so she could feel justified in her little power trip. But I wasn't giving her the satisfaction. She walked off to the side to take the call, clearly trying to make it sound as serious as possible. "Yes, we have a man on restricted lake property. Yes, refusing to identify himself. He's acting hostile." Hostile? I hadn't even stood up straight. The two men stayed back, whispering between themselves like they were forming a neighborhood SWAT plan. That's when I pulled out my phone and made a much quieter call to Deputy Owens, a longtime family friend and the local sheriff's deputy. I gave him the short version. "Hey, some HOA folks are trying to get me removed from my dock. Thought you'd want to come by before they embarrass themselves." He chuckled. "Be there in 10. Meanwhile, the woman started pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, now reading off descriptions of me and pointing like I was a suspect on a wanted poster. "Yes, mid-30s, white t-shirt, fishing rod, seems uncooperative." I could barely keep a straight face. I just tipped my hat back, leaned on the arm of my chair, and waited, because I already knew how this story ended. And they were about to learn that sometimes when you try to flex power over the wrong person, you end up embarrassing yourself in front of a deputy on the land you don't even own. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and texted Deputy Owens, the local sheriff's deputy who'd known my family since I was a kid. A good man. Fair. And more importantly, someone who'd been dealing with HOA drama since before Crescent Lake Shores even broke ground. My message was short and sweet. "HOA on my dock claiming I'm trespassing. Want to come watch this get awkward?" He replied with one word, "On my way." Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed lake police were getting bold. The woman, still holding her clipboard like a weapon, was now striding up and down the dock, shaking her head in disgust. "This is exactly why we need more enforcement," she said to the two men behind her, loud enough for me to hear. "People thinking they can just fish wherever they please. No respect for rules. No respect for boundaries." One of the guys pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures of me like I was some kind of environmental threat. "Make sure you get the cooler, too," the woman instructed. "We'll want proof he was planning to stay." I almost laughed. Proof of a cooler? Really? I didn't say anything. I just kept fishing, calm as a monk, letting the sun warm my shoulders while the HOA squad paced like they were preparing a citizen's arrest. 15 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. Deputy Owen's SUV rolled up quietly, but its presence hit like a thunderclap. He stepped out, uniform crisp, face unreadable. "Afternoon," he said casually as he approached the trio. The woman pounced. "Thank goodness you're here. This man is refusing to leave HOA-managed lakefront property. He has no unit number, no HOA badge, and he's fishing without permission." Deputy Owens tilted his head, then looked at me. "Everything all right?" I nodded. "Just fishing. Same as always." The deputy turned back to the woman. "And you're saying he's trespassing?" "Yes," she said, arms folded. "He's violating Crescent Lakeshore's lake access rules. I demand he be removed immediately." Owens raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some proof of ownership or HOA jurisdiction over this lake." She eagerly produced her community map, unfolding it like it was a secret treasure map. "Right here," she said, pointing, "this is our shoreline. That dock he's on, it falls within our HOA's recreational overlay zone." I watched patiently as Owens took the map, glanced at it for a second, and then chuckled. "Ma'am, this is a marketing brochure," he said, "not a legal property map." Her mouth opened, then closed. Then I stood up, walked over, and handed Owens a folder from my tackle box. I always kept a laminated copy of the property deed, survey lines, and lake rights, because around here, HOA folks had a habit of assuming ownership of things they didn't buy. Owens flipped through the pages. Then he looked up. "He's right," he said flatly. "This lake is privately owned. So is the dock. So is the land from the gravel road all the way to that fence line over there. And none of it, not 1 square foot, is under Crescent Lakeshore's jurisdiction." The woman blinked. But, we have access rights." "No," Owens said, cutting her off. "You assumed you did. But you don't. This land was never included in your community's subdivision plat, which means you're standing on his property." The two men behind her suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear. Owens turned to me. "Would you like them escorted off your land?" I looked at them. No more smugness, no more orders, just pale faces and frozen stares. I smiled. "Yeah, I think that'd be best." Owens nodded. "All right, folks, you're going to need to leave. Now." And just like that, the same people who had stormed my dock with clipboards and accusations were now being walked off it like unruly guests at a wedding they weren't invited to. It was beautiful, and I hadn't even had to stop fishing. They left quietly that day, escorted by the same deputy they had proudly called to have me removed. There was no more shouting, no more accusations, just the slow crunch of gravel under their golf cart tires as they disappeared up the path, their heads down and their egos bruised. I sat back down in my folding chair, dipped the tip of my fishing rod back into the lake, and cast my line again. The water rippled, the breeze returned, and the peace they tried so hard to ruin gently reclaimed its place. But I wasn't done. I'm not the kind of guy who likes confrontation, but I do believe in setting boundaries, especially when it comes to property you've worked your whole life to protect. So, the very next morning, I sent a certified cease and desist letter to the Crescent Lakeshore's HOA board. It was professional, direct, and very clear. Any future trespassing by HOA representatives onto Parcel 9B or its lakefront area will be met with formal legal action. Continued harassment will result in civil claims for damages, including but not limited to emotional distress and interference with lawful enjoyment of private property. It felt good. Not petty, necessary. About a week later, I received a large padded envelope on my front porch. Inside was a typed letter of apology from the HOA board, signed by none other than the woman who'd tried to have me escorted off my own dock. She also included a gift basket packed with fancy crackers, locally sourced honey, sunscreen, and a bottle of lemonade. But the note was the real kicker. "Thank you for your patience and understanding. We were unaware of the true ownership status of the lake and apologize for any distress caused." Unaware, huh? You don't say. But what happened next surprised me. Over the following weeks, a trickle of emails and handwritten notes started coming in, this time from actual homeowners in Crescent Lakeshores. Many of them had no idea the HOA didn't own the lake. Some assumed their monthly dues covered access to the entire shoreline. Others had grown tired of the board's aggressive behavior and were grateful someone had finally stood up to them. A few even came to apologize in person. One older gentleman told me, "I've lived here 6 years and never knew your family owned this place. Honestly, I'm relieved it's not under HOA control." And that's when the idea hit me. Instead of closing off the lake to everyone, I decided to do the opposite, open it up, but on my terms. So I created seasonal fishing passes managed privately. They weren't expensive, just enough to help maintain the dock, clean the shoreline, and remind people that access here came from respect, not entitlement. Anyone could fish, relax, and enjoy the lake. No golf carts needed, as long as they followed the simple rule: respect the land, and the land will welcome you. Now, my weekends at the lake look very different. I see kids casting lines from the shore, parents sitting in folding chairs, chatting and laughing, even a few retired couples paddling quietly across the lake in inflatable kayaks. And not a single clipboard in sight. Sometimes I see the former HOA president walking her dog nearby. She doesn't bring backup anymore. She just gives me a polite smile and a wave, and I wave back. Because she learned something that day, something a lot of people forget. You can create maps, draft rules, and wear matching polo shirts, but that doesn't make you the owner. Respect does. History does. Truth does. And sometimes it only takes a quiet fisherman with a land deed to remind them.